Rabbi Bengelsdorf's appearance at the airport, where, according to the caption beneath the photograph on the front page of the Newark News, he stood first in line to shake Lindbergh's hand when he emerged from the cockpit of the Spirit of St. Louis, was a source of consternation to a great number of the city's Jews, my parents among them, as was the quotation attributed to him in the paper's account of Lindbergh's brief visit. "I am here," Rabbi Bengelsdorf told the News, "to crush all doubt of the unadulterated loyalty to the American Jews of the United States of America. I offer my support to the candidacy of Colonel Lindbergh because the political objectives of my people are identified with his. America is our beloved homeland. America is our only homeland. Our religion is independent of any piece of land other than this great country, to which now, as always, we commit our total devotion and allegiance as the proudest of citizens. I want Charles Lindbergh to be my president, in spite of my being a Jew, but not in spite of being a Jew, but because I am a Jew, an American Jew." 3 months later, Bengelsdorf participated in the huge rally held at Madison Square Garden to mark the end of Lindbergh's flying tour. By then, the election was but 2 weeks away, and though there appeared to be growing Lindbergh support among voters throughout the traditionally Democratic South, and close contests were predicted in the most conservative Midwestern states, national polls showed the president comfortably ahead in the popular vote, and well ahead in electoral votes. Republican Party leaders were reported to be in despair over their candidate's stubborn refusal to allow anyone other than himself to determine the strategy of his campaign. And so, to draw him out of the repetitious austerity of his interminable barnstorming and envelop him in an atmosphere more like that of the boisterous Philadelphia nominating convention, the Madison Square Garden rally was organized and broadcast nationwide on the evening of the second Monday in October. The 15 speakers introducing Lindbergh that night were described as prominent Americans from all walks of life. Among them was a farm leader to talk about the harm war would do to American farming, which was in crisis still from the First World War and the Depression. A labor leader to talk about the disaster a war would represent for American workers, whose lives would be regimented by government agencies. A manufacturer to talk about the catastrophic long-term consequences of American industry of wartime, overexpansion and onerous taxation. A Protestant clergyman to talk about the brutalizing effect of modern warfare on the young men who would be doing the fighting, and a Catholic priest to talk about the inevitable deterioration of the spiritual life of a peace-loving nation like our own, and the destruction of decency and kindness because of the hatred bred by war. Lastly, there was a rabbi, New Jersey's Lionel Bengelsdorf, who received an especially hearty welcome from the full house of Lindbergh supporters when his turn came to take the lectern, and who was there to expatiate on how Lindbergh's association with Nazis was anything but complicious. "Yep," Alvin said, "they bought him, the fix is in. They slipped a gold ring through his big Jew nose, and now they can lead him anywhere." "You don't know that," my father said, but not because he wasn't himself steamed by Bengelsdorf's behavior. "Listen to the man," he told Alvin. "Give the man a hearing, it's only fair," words uttered largely for Sandy's benefit and mine, to keep the startling turn of events from seeming as terrible to the two of us as it did to the adults. The night before, I had fallen onto the floor in my sleep, something that hadn't happened since I'd first graduated from a crib to a bed, and to prevent me rolling out of it, my parents had set a pair of kitchen chairs on the side of the mattress. When it was assumed automatically that my falling like that after all these years could only have had to do with Lindbergh showing up at Newark Airport, I insisted that I didn't remember a bad dream about Lindbergh, that I just remembered waking up on the floor between my brother's bed and mine, even though I happened to know that I virtually never got to sleep any longer without envisioning the Lindbergh drawings stashed away in my brother's portfolio. I kept wanting to ask Sandy if he could hide them in our cellar storage bin instead of under the bed beside mine, but because I'd sworn not to speak about his drawings to anyone, and because I couldn't bring myself to part with my own Lindbergh stamp, I didn't dare raise them as an issue, though they were indeed haunting me and rendering unapproachable the brother whose reassurance I'd never needed more. It was a cold evening, the heat was on and the windows were closed, but even without being able to hear them, you knew the radio you knew that radios were playing up and down the block, and that families who wouldn't otherwise consider listening to a Lindbergh rally were tuned in because of the scheduled appearance there of Rabbi Bengelsdorf. Among his own congregants, a few important people had already begun to call for his resignation, if not for his immediate removal by the temple's board of trustees, while the majority, continuing to support him, tried to believe that their rabbi was merely exercising his democratic right of free speech, and that, horrified though they were by his public endorsement of Lindbergh, to attempt to silence a conscience as renowned as his did not fall within their rights. That night, Rabbi Bengelsdorf disclosed to America what he claimed to be the true motive behind Lindbergh's personal flying missions to Germany in the 1930s. Contrary to the propaganda disseminated by his critics, the rabbi informed us, he did not once visit Germany as a sympathizer or a supporter of Hitler's, but rather he traveled each and every time as a secret advisor to the U.S. government. Far from his betraying America, as the misguided and the ill-intentioned continue to charge, Colonel Lindbergh has almost single-handedly served to strengthen America's military preparedness by imparting his knowledge to our own military and by doing everything within his power to advance the cause of American aviation and to expand America's air defenses. Jesus, my father cried. Everybody knows. Shh, whispered Alvin. Shh. Let the great orator speak. Yes, in 1936, long before the beginning of European hostilities, the Nazis awarded Colonel Lindbergh a medal, and yes, continued Bengelsdorf, yes, the colonel accepted their medal, but all the while, my friends, all the while secretly exploiting their administration in order to protect and preserve our democracy and to preserve our neutrality through strength. I cannot believe, my father began. Try, muttered Alvin evilly. This is not America's war, Bengelsdorf announced, and the crowd at Madison Square Garden responded with a full minute of applause. This, the rabbi told them, is Europe's war. Again sustained applause. It is one of 1,000-year-long sequence of European wars dating back to the time of Charlemagne. It is their second devastating war in less than half a century. And can anyone forget the tragic cost to America of that last great war? 40,000 Americans killed in action, 192,000 Americans wounded, 76,000 Americans dead of disease, 350,000 Americans on disability today because of their participation in that war. And just how astronomical will the price be this time? The number of our dead, tell me, President Roosevelt. Will it be merely doubled or trebled? Or will it perhaps be quadrupled? Tell me, Mr. President, what sort of America? Will the massive slaughter of innocent American boys leave in its wake? Of course, the Nazi harassment and persecution of the German Jewish population is a cause of enormous anguish to me, as it is to every Jew. During the years I was studying theology with the facilities of the great German universities in Heidelberg and Bonn, I made many distinguished friends there, great men of learning who today, simply because they are Germans of Jewish extraction, have been dismissed from long-held scholarly positions, and are being ruthlessly persecuted by the Nazi hoodlums who have taken command of their homeland. I oppose their treatment with every ounce of my strength, and so too does Colonel Lindbergh oppose their treatment. But how will this cruel fate that has befallen them in their own land be alleviated by our great country going to war with their tormentors? If anything, the predicament of all Germany's Jews would only worsen immeasurably. Worsen, I fear, tragically. Yes, I am a Jew, and as a Jew I feel their suffering with a familial sharpness. But I am an American citizen, my friends. Again the applause. I am an American born and raised, and so I ask you, how would my pain be lessened if America were now to enter the war, and along with the sons of our Protestant families and the sons of our Catholic families, the sons of our Jewish families, were to fight and die by the tens of thousands on a blood-soaked European battleground? How would my pain be diminished by my having to console my very own congregants. It was my mother, usually the least ardent member of our family, the one ordinarily quieting the rest of us, when we turned demonstrative, who all at once found the sound of Bengelsdorf's southern accent so intolerable that she had to leave the room. But until he finished his speech and was loudly cheered off stage by the garden audience, no one else moved or said another word. I wouldn't dare to, and my brother was preoccupied, as he often was in such a setting, with sketching what we all looked like, now while listening to the radio. Alvin's was the silence of murderous loathing, and my father, divested for perhaps the first time in his life of that relentless passion he brought to the struggle against setback and disappointment, was too stirred to speak. Pandemonium, unspeakable delight. Lindbergh had at last stepped onto the garden stage, and like someone half-demented, my father leaped from the sofa and snapped off the radio just as my mother came back into the living room and asked, "Who would like something? Alvin?" she said with tears in her eyes. "A cup of tea?" Her job was to hold our world together as calmly and sensibly as she could. That was what gave her life fullness, was all she was trying to do, and yet never had any of us seen her rendered so ridiculous by this commonplace maternal ambition. "What the hell is going on?" my father began to shout. "What the hell did he do that for? That stupid speech! Does he think that one single Jew is now going to go and vote for this anti-Semite because of that stupid lying speech? Has he completely lost his mind? What does he think he's doing?" "Koshering Lindbergh," Alan said. "Koshering Lindbergh for the Goyim." "Koshering what?" my father said, exasperated with Alan's seemingly speaking sarcastic nonsense at a moment of so much confusion. "Doing what?" "They didn't get him up there to talk to Jews. They didn't buy him off for that, don't you understand?" Alan asked, fiery now with what he took to be the underlying truth. "He's up there talking to the Goyim. He's giving the Goyim all over the country his personal rabbi's permission to vote for Lindy on Election Day. Don't you see, Uncle Herman, what they got the great Bengelsdorf to do? He just guaranteed Roosevelt's defeat." And we will pause there.